series. Today, we are very excited to have Francis Robichaud with us, joining us talking about his road to product management from a software engineering background. As a reminder, for those of you who are joining us live, please feel free to comment in the chat box or the comments. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to type them away. Thank you, Francis, for joining us today. We are very
Hi.
excited to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and share my experience and the transition I've been going through over the course of a few years.
Yeah, so before you became a founder, you were senior product manager at Pleo as well. And can you just describe to us how you started in product management from your software engineering background?
Yeah, sounds good. I did, in fact, work at Pleo. I also had a product management role at Petal. And but before that, I used to work at BlackBerry, which is back then was a successful company in Canada, and a fast-growing company that had huge challenges at it itself. But like personally, I've always been a passionate software engineer, so I've been writing code for years and years before I joined BlackBerry as my first job, or that's where I started my career. And I think like this, throughout this like journey, the first thoughts I had around product management started at BlackBerry, where you could really feel from the inside that we were innovating just to replicate or copy a bit the path that Apple and Google were taking with Android or with the Apple iOS system. And it felt like BlackBerry was, although it was a leader in that space in smartphone, was trying to play catch up, and it didn't really know how to innovate. So I was this person in the room of like 150 engineers. I kept raising my hand and questioning why we were building things that we built internally, where I didn't see the fit, but it was just my personal opinion. So I think that's where I started like really having this mentality of our curiosity of going to products and asking the why we're building stuff, and not just monkey coding in my cubicle for hours. And so that led into a move, professional move to Petal, where I did do jump from yes, a software engineering position to a product management position over the years when I was there. And then I also spent 2 years with Pleo, where I came in a product management role in a very hyper growth mode of in the company. I think Pleo now has over 800 people. So it was a different challenge to be a PM and grow with the company, both the product portfolio, the product, and keep everyone aligned.
Yeah. Yeah, and then while you made that transition into software engineering, how did you prepare for the role of product management? Did you talk to product managers? Did you have any resources?
Well, yeah, it's a very good question. I did, like, I'm a huge geek and fan of Hacker News, and I did read a lot about like successful startups, successful companies, but also failures of companies that didn't really find the product market fit when they were starting their projects, and probably because they were not tackling the problem that was big enough as a company or as a product team, and that wouldn't lead to revenues or creating value that eventually would lead to the revenues, but they were not maybe building core values for the market, for the customers. And so, and I think it's one of the challenges for software engineers or any startup that builds with a very engineering culture of writing code in the basement, or this typical Silicon Valley approach of like, let's code in our garage, and eventually something will work out. And I think that's also like reflects in why I built our company Lime. It's that instead of relying on my software engineering skills and writing code, I instead relied on the product management aspects of my career path, where it was like, I need to meet with clients, I need to meet with the market, understand the needs, and really have this mentality of trying to solve a problem at scale for which some customers would be willing to pay. So there's in how to prepare for PM, there has been like several milestones. Definitely like understanding how to build a product from the technical aspect to shipping a product. So for this part, I did rely on my software engineering background a lot, and good product teams have very good engineers they can rely on, so that the mechanic of like, there's a need, we know how to build it, we know how to ship it, and ensure some quality levels. So I did rely on this. But then along my careers and the challenges we had as myself as a product manager or with the teams, it's always been about tackling a bigger story of the product piece. What I mean by that is like, okay, sure, we can ship one feature, but how to make this a repeatable process? How to make this agile so that every 2 weeks we know how to plan? So the whole Scrum, Agile, and Agile approach to things of really scoping down pieces that engineers would work on. I think this is like the second part where really you need your team and work as with your team to really build some minimal pieces and do quick iterations with them so that you constantly create value for your customers.
Yeah, and you describe a roadmap into product management. Can you further go into this?
Yeah, definitely. I think someone like that has, let's say, zero knowledge of product at all. There's definitely like the reading. So like Hacker News is one source, but I'd say 10 years ago it was hard to really define the difference between project management versus maybe product management. And now there's a lot of literature about it. It's still hard to find certifications and path in university where you can take classes and graduate from product management. But there's a lot of literature around, like if I can think about the Lean Startup by Eric Weiss, or any books by Strategizer that really helps you with tools to structure your approach to product. I also really like Amplitude's North Star book, where I think the approach has always been ask yourself why you're building something and not just build it for the need or sake of technology. So why are you building? So which problem are you solving? And throughout the years, how I've learned was really about like, okay, how do I build it? Like from a technical perspective, how do we build it as a team? And now, how do we build it to create value for a customer? And I think this mind shift is really important. So the more you operate your product team, you tend to stop looking inside your team and you start looking outside. And that's where you start having a transition of managing stakeholders. And managing stakeholders, it's both from your internal stakeholders, so executives, sales teams, customer success teams. These are all valuable people from the company that hear direct feedback from customers or potential customers. So you need to like start shifting your focus and really find a way to structure the feedback you get from the field, and then work with your designer to also reach out to potential customers, the ones that don't necessarily want to talk to you. So the ones the sales teams have reached out to and say, no, like we don't want your product. So you need this curiosity as a PM to really sit down with your designer, and this customer will potentially talk to you. They'll be happy to tell you why they think your solution is not appropriate or it's not the right fit for them. And that is a very valuable source of information. Of course, everybody likes to be told yes and work with very active customers or clients. It's easier, but working with the ones that tell you no is very valuable insights into learning about your product and improving. So the first phase is really like working inside on the technical and mechanics of the product team. The second would be like working with your stakeholders. And I'd say the third one is working on the business side. And that did take me a few years to really shift my focus on how do we make the product teams and our product team in our niche a very successful team that helps the business, helps our company. And that relies back on the North Star metric by Amplitude, like where you need to have this North Star metric. You need to have KPIs, so key performing indicators, or objectives and key results, a way to measure yourself. So when you're building a roadmap, which is sometimes like very static, or it's a anyone can build a roadmap. It's the role of mini PMs, but in reality, like anybody can just put like milestones on a chart and say, well, this is what we're going to ship. But how do you make sure that it's the best items are on your roadmap? And then you need to connect this back with like the feedback you get from your customers, from your internal stakeholders, from potential clients as well, from the market, from the industry, and also align this with business goals. I'll give you an example. If the company's objectives is not about revenue, in many cases, sometimes it's about revenues, but it might be a metric that we have internally because we're going to achieve a financing round, a fundraising of X million. And then what the investors want to see is that what we have, we reach 1 million active customers. Maybe that will shift what you'll put on your roadmap as a PM. And that will change the dynamic. So you might be hearing out about like closed loss deals from the sales more than you will listen to your internal stakeholders about customer satisfaction and feature micro improvements. So really like connecting in the third phase, your roadmap with business goals, I think is key to becoming a very successful product manager. And honestly, that's what people want to hear in the market. Like companies want to hear this, that, oh, this PM will be a contributor. They will listen to us as an executive team or as a product director. I'm happy I'll meet a product manager candidate for a role that will take our feedback into account and help us grow the business.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that example. I just want to read this comment to you. Most engineer to PMs I know didn't enjoy programming. It's really interesting to hear you were passionate about development at the time.
Yeah. It is well. I wouldn't say all PMs are not happy about coding, but and that's one path of going. But in my case, it was quite different. Yes, I thought that I was not bringing the most value in my work hours by coding because I had been frustrated before of coding things that would end up not being used by a customer. And read here in between the lines, like BlackBerry was a very, I had a very frustrating experiences where, the business would ask you to build a new feature, you'd work on it like long hours over 4 or 6 months just to get the product canned a few months after with no traction from customer. And I'd say like, this is a big challenge for a PM because that can build up frustration from your team internally. So in my case, like it was not because I didn't like coding. I do appreciate coding. I actually have something to change on the website that's in Vue.js, and I'll do it myself. I asked the team to like, please let me code something over the next week. So, but it was just different. It's both are sometimes related to problem solving. In my case, I was willing to tackle the problem of building the right thing, which required a lot of human interactions, communications, and then taking a risk with the team. Let's try something for 2 weeks, and then measure ourselves and pivot if this new feature ends up not being used. Well, let's not waste more than 2-4 weeks working on it, and then can it and put it aside because there's no fit for that product. So I wouldn't say it was not my experience that PMs with an engineering background and ended up in this position because they didn't like coding. I think I'm one of the counter example where I did love coding. I still code with my son that's interested in robotics. So it's more about like different problem solving skills or interests.
Yeah, but the example that you bring up is how it's important to communicate as PMs, communicate with engineers and to communicate the value and keep checking in and doing the market fit periodically or testing the MVP. Yeah. That's a great example of why it's important and not just, 6 months later check up and the resources are wasted.
Exactly. And I think that's also, it shows also the need to build trust with your team. And I think that helped me a lot for engineers, knowing that I came from an engineering role. They knew that I could have a bias for them, which I was trying to be opaque and say, no, the opinion of all stakeholders are well taken into account. But I did have some sensibility on, well, the team has just worked on a module that was more tied to like bugs or that one feature people didn't really want to work on. So I think my role as a PM was also to keep motivation had the highest, because that's where you see the highest throughput from engineers. And so I would have some flexibility in roadmap, saying, well, we worked on something that was very hard to deliver on, so let's have 2-week fun sprint, or features. Let's work on features that I know would please the engineers. And I think, like, yes, communication is key, but also understanding that there's a balance of what you can ask a team, and you're not their client, right? You're working with them. You're part of the team. It has to be fun to work with you as a PM. It needs to be feel like you're achieving milestones as a group, and it's not the PM that's taking credit for something. It's a team effort, and then the PM is only taking what he has heard from the market, and has worked maybe with the designer, and just bringing it to the team, and then we're all together solving for the feature or the need of the market. So team efforts is definitely key, and the PM has a big quarterback role in that team.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. You mentioned business skills, and how did you brush up on your business skills, or or other skills that as a PM you should have and that you needed to work on?
I'd say one part of my personality, or a good PM's personality, is empathy. And you can have a lot of empathy you should have a lot of empathy for your clients. You need to understand their problem. And so I'd say that can be dangerous, though, because if you have too much empathy for clients, that they'll say, well, we'll sign your contract and we'll become clients if you ship this and that feature. And you feel like, well, okay, well, this can help, but you can't let your empathy as a PM dictate your roadmap. And it's always been hard, like taking a step back, and because of a good PM, the best PM you'll find will say no to everything. And a good PM will say no because they'll have the ability to take a step back, looking at all the options and all the requests that are coming, and using their tools, which is data and feedback, to build the best roadmap they can. And so, yeah, I'm just saying, like, having too much empathy and then executing on it will help one client that says they might, sign a contract, but the reality is that they might not sell the contract. And while you're giving attention to one, you might not be addressing 200 more needs, or the top one priority you should be working on. And that priority could help drive business and achieve important milestones for the company. I've seen it in one of my professional career examples that when we ranked the customer feedback, when we had ton of feedback, the top 4 elements that were the most requested features, although we had tons of product teams, those top 4 customer features were not tackled or prioritized by any team, although there were, I think at that time, 8 product teams across the company. So there was really something that didn't work. So maybe in that case, we were just reaching too much for business objectives and sales metrics, and not enough about customer retention and happiness about the product. So I think it's a fine balance. Yes, business metrics matter. You want to make the business successful. You want to make your internal teams successful with their own objectives. But it's a fine balance of hearing your customers and prioritizing features and improvements they're asking for, because there's nothing as worse as losing a client. It takes 10 times more resources, money, and time to obtain one client than to keep a client that's already onboarded. So there's a fine balance. Yes, business objectives, but customer retention, the example I'm giving, should be one highly rated business objective.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Everything is a balance. It seems like you're a juggler. You've balanced all the areas.
Yeah, you do actually,
Product.
and you have to manage a lot of politics, and that's where it's important to maintain healthy and constructive relations with your colleagues. You need to explain them. I said it before, but when you say no, it can't be just a cold no. It has to be well thought and then explained to this person, just to help them understand your role, and then also back up the reason you're saying no with data. It's not just because you don't want to serve them well. It's because this is not the highest priority to meet company objectives in the short term.
Mhm. And what is it about product management that you love? Why is product management more for you? Or now it's being a founder. But what do you love about what do you love about product management?
Well, there are various aspects of product management. I do like when our team achieves an important milestone, and achieving a milestone is we've built something for which like the client sees value. So when we do this as a team and you figure out like as a PM you've been at the core of this initiative, there was nothing, you didn't meet, you found a market need that was not answered, you designed it, prototyped it with your designer, validated the concept with your internal team, and then eventually you ship it and then the customer uses it day one. God, this is a very nice feeling. But beyond that, it's just having all these human interactions and people that are so happy that you meet with them. And then as you present what you're doing, they say, yes, we're struggling with this part of our business or this part of our organization, and will you help us? And then it's like, this is, it's a party when someone clearly explains that they see value in what you're building. It's fantastic. And it's about like being a few months or years ahead of the market. This is why, like, a startup like ours right now is successful. We did see an opportunity in the market. We had a very product-led approach to it, and then we met with clients. And finally, I found you, like our company. You're providing a service that we've been waiting for years, and I'd say like this is where I really find our um, the yeah the gratitude of building products and innovating.
Yeah, can you tell us more about Lime?
Sure. Align is a patient engagement digital solution. So we do a digital path journey for patients, so that from the moment they're scheduled for an appointment or a medical intervention, we communicate all the digital documentation to them ahead of surgery, for example, so that they become better prepared for their medical procedure. That leads to less readmissions, better engagement from patients, better adhesion to their care plan. So there's huge benefits for both the organization that had to dedicate workers to communicate with patients by phone or with outdated paper, and now it's like a pretty streamlined process, and we're co-building the solution with our clients. So it's really motivating to get the feedback as soon as we deliver new features. We're so aligned and so aligned with their needs, and then we deliver with a record time new features. And it's something like the healthcare industry has not been used to over the last few years, where it's always been known as a slow-paced industry. But in our case, like we found the opposite, where things move fast. And I think the product approach that we have has a lot to do with it. And in our company, we just saw this opportunity and need for the market with an aging population. How do we reduce the administrative burden for hospitals? And so we did find literature from the industry that said like higher patient engagement leads to better patient outcomes, and there was a need and a lack of solutions in the market.
Oh, very nice. And then wearing your founder hat, wearing your software engineer hat, wearing your product management hat, can you just briefly talk about like how they came about during the whole process of starting this? Any like learning success stories?
Well, as a founder, it's a different story, but like than just building products. But I'd say I did use each one of those apps at a very in a timely manner. So for a while, I was a full-time software engineer as a solo founder, but also a solo team for a while. So I just focused on software engineering until I found the right person to replace me. And the relation now I have with our CTO is just how can I help you in making sure that the technology decisions you take are well aligned with the company's goal. But so I used that hat for a portion of the company as we were building the product, and then I used my product manager hat for a while so that I could run interviews with customers and then really understand the market opportunity we were facing and see, okay, is this opportunity in the market large enough and can be replicated outside of our local market here? And so I did use this until I was replaced by our CTO, Martin, that took over that role. And then we're just co-working together now in this piece, but he's now leading all the product initiatives, running all the product roadmap and analyzing the market opportunities and deciding on features. And also, I just, as a founder, I think that's one way of doing things is, understanding the role and then just passing it on to someone that they can execute it better than you would. So I'm super lucky I found Martin and Jonathan that we actually did work together before, but they joined the adventure. It's been just a wonderful story so far.
And I wish you best of luck with the company. I want to go back to the audience. If anyone has any comments, questions, please feel free. We only have a couple more minutes left while we wait for any audience questions. My last question, any resources that you recommend for anyone that's transitioning from software engineering to product management, or just overall product management resources besides Hacker News?
Yeah, I would say, well, there are definitely a few books I can, when we post this on LinkedIn, also I'll share the links to the books I would call the reference books that any PMs should have. But there's definitely the Lean Startup that I mentioned about from Eric Weiss that really sets the culture of a company about the discovery process, learning about the market, and quickly evaluating, is this a good solution or a good product you're building. And then all the tools from strategizer.com and their books. Business Canvas and Value Proposition Canvas. These books really set the tone on in an easy way to really question yourself on how to innovate in one or the other's industry. And that would be more for founders or small teams that I would recommend those books. And for existing teams or larger organizations, there's definitely Product Leadership by Martin Erickson and a few others. I would definitely recommend this book. I talked about North Star metric from Amplitude. I'm really keen on setting clear goals every year, every quarter, and not just sales objectives, but like really, how do you let's set objectives, and not 200 of them, but smart objectives, so measurable in a concise time frame. So that it doesn't matter, like at first when you set them up, if you meet them, but at least you're trying to reach for a goal. And it's so much easier for a PM if you can say no, because what you're asking for is not on our radar in terms of objective now. Let's see next quarter or maybe next year. That's a bit too far. Usually I say next quarter, but let's reevaluate next quarter and let's work with the organization to bring your idea as an objective and see how this idea is contributing to the company. So North Star metric by Amplitude is really helpful. And I'd say any PM out there, you should read Monetizing Innovation by Madhavan Manajuma. It's definitely a valuable resource because building innovation, I mean, everybody can build a roadmap, you'll get something out. You'll get people coding. You'll get a feature, a web platform, whatever you're building. But how do you make sure you capture value out of it financially? Because if you're not maximizing the financial potential of your product, that leads to less investment in your R&D team, less investment in research, less investment from all parts of your organization. So really monetizing innovation. And it's actually in the book, one of the first things they encourage you to ask your client, how much would you be willing to pay for this prototype? And that opens the door about like, okay, well, if the problem is big enough, someone is willing to pay for it. If they say, well, if it's free, I'll use it. I might use it. That could lead to other challenges I've seen before with freemiums. So definitely, like, monetizing innovation is a very good resource.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if anyone has any further questions for Francis, please feel free to reach out. I put your links in the description. Thank you so much, Francis, for describing your journey and giving us such great examples. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks
Thanks
for
for the
joining us
questions,
live.
and thanks for attending. Bye-bye.
Thank you.